Good morning, distinguished panelists on and off the dais, distinguished organizers, students, respected teachers. I am extremely thankful to the organization for having me here. I just have come back yesterday from an intensive, almost 9 days, Southeast Asian summer workshop where I was a research person that was organized by SOAS London in Yogyakarta. I presented a paper on Ketanagara, a ruler who before his assassination in 1292, before Kublai Khan attacked Java, consecrated Chamunda in 1292 in Sanskrit. And I tried to look at Odishan linkages in that paper which I presented. But that was an intensive 8 days course of SOAS. People who are interested in Southeast Asian art, may I inform you that Alpha Wood scholarship program is there to pursue a diploma program in SOAS London for about 1 year in Southeast Asian art, and Alpha would be happy to fund that program. That is only meant for Southeast Asian students. Therefore, all Southeast Asian students should go and have an intensive diploma course for 1 year in SOAS. I'll be making a presentation on textile trade boom in the Indian Ocean from 10th to 13th century using old Javanese sources. I'll be using old Javanese sources from 10th, 13th century, 9 Sima Charter. Sima, Indonesian might be knowing if there are Indonesian people. Sima means like our royal copper plate grants or grants which are given to officials. And in those inscriptions of Sima, inscriptions which are plenty in Indonesia, Central Java from 8th century AD onwards up to Majapahit period, we have these charters referring to various privileges granted to various officials, including tax privileges and other privileges. I'll be using 9 of these Sima charters from 10th century to 1305, where there are references to tax-paying farmers. Tax-paying farmers from outsides who were trading in Central Java, Eastern Java from 9th, 10th century to 1305. That's the last inscriptions I have. And I'll be looking at them where Kalinga is not a generic term. Kalinga figures as a South Asian, Chinese, as part of Chinese charm and other, where they are exclusively referred to as part of these tax-paying foreigners who were trading in different centers of Central and Eastern Java. But before I do so, let me briefly outline the historiography of Southeast Asia because I have 30 minutes with me. Let me tell you, Southeast Asia is only 11 countries, and if you look at the Indic cultural arc, it spreads up to Japan. And if you look at present-day Japan, the footprint of Indic cultural arc is much more salient, present, and extant today than that of Southeast Asia, many of the Southeast Asian countries. Therefore, when we are talking of Southeast Asia, let us not be driven by the cartographic divisions of modern nation-states that are imposed by the epistemology of the West. There are broad civilizational linkage, which I hesitate to use the term Indianizations, because for me, Angkor Wat is definitely a Khmer monument. The kind of perfection, grandeur of churning of ocean, the Ananta Sai Vishnu in Wat is distinctly a Khmer product. So also Borobudur, Chandil, Mendu, Chandi Seu, Chandi Prambanam, we have been to these. You have 72 panels of Ramayana in the Brahma and the Shiva temple of Prambanam, and they are the most elaborate sculptural reliefs that you can find anywhere in the world. Whereas the Vishnu temple, we have the Krishna Yasa, the Harivansa story, elaborating Krishna, but they are distinct. You won't find in Indian monuments. So also Seu, as a Vajradhatu Mandala, or Borobudur, as a Vajradhatu Mandala. Let me therefore, when we are speaking of Indic cultural arc, that doesn't mean that, it was all Indianizations. It was about fractal circularity. Even in 1292, where we have Nalanda and other monasteries being destroyed, people from Tibet were not only consecrating Hevajra Chakra rites for Kublai Khan in South China or in Yuan dynasty, they are also circulating, Tibetan monks were circulating in Eastern Java in the period of Kretanagara. Therefore, to say that, for example, if you look at the double ikat, the Gering Singh Venkebo ikat, double ikat of Java, Bali, it is a distinctly Balinese style. You won't find double ikat. Even though Patola or the weft-hand dwarf, which you call as Bandha textiles of Sambalpuri, Katak and others, Patola's existence, that is the ikat traditions of Western India, of Gujarat, being present in Javanese water, in Indonesian water in 10th century. You have in Asmolean Museum one of the pieces of Patola of Gujarat being present in Asmolean Museum, suggesting the existence of ikat traditions. Therefore, to speak of Indianizations, as Swordes did in his Indianization of Southeast Asia, is deeply problematic. We have a very recent book which came out in the form of Creative South. Andrea Akri and Peter Sarok of SOAS have edited. Dalrymple has reviewed this book in New York Review. I would suggest you to also go through the Creative South. Therefore, South, that is the waters of Indian Oceans of this part, which you call as Southeast Asia, was highly creative. Certainly there are circulations, and many of the sources of the circulations are from India, but the kind of grandeur, the kind of perfections they made in implementing the ideas that emanated from India is remarkable. You go to what, for example, we believe that Angkor Wat is everything of Angkor. No, Angkor is a large area. Look at Jayavarman II of Angkor. Jayavarman II, which you call as Mahendra Parvata, Mahendragiri, he created a network of hospitals, Arogya Salas, 102 hospitals in Angkor areas in, let's say, 10th century AD. That is quite remarkable. Many of them are now excavated, and therefore to say that Indian arc is all about passive recipient, the South is merely a passive recipient is not true. The South is, that is this part of India, this part of Southeast Asia was highly creative. But having said that, everybody acknowledges that India is a major source of Southeast Asian source. Look at Champa. Champa was a state from 2nd century AD in South and Central Vietnam. I have been part of the Da Nang Museum, some of the documentations work, and look at Champa. It registered Chinese incursions throughout. We have Champa area having Indic influences right from 2nd, 3rd century AD and went on right throughout history. Therefore, we need to also recognize the fact that South is equally creative. It played a role or two in backward circulations as well to India. And I'll share this, that in the early historical period, if you know about Professor Basa's work, Kishore Basa's work, whose PhD was on westerly trade of Indian Ocean, he looked at a particular bead called monochrome glass beads. And these monochrome glass beads of early historical period was most likely manufactured in Southeast Asia and exported to sites like, for example, Shishupalgarh, Arikamedu, and other sites. Look at Dongson bronze of early historical period. The height in bronze of Vietnam, OKO sites. 3 days back, archaeologists from National University of Australia excavated sites of OKO sites, which talks about discovery of so-called Kari 2000 BC. If you look at OKO site, the height that they produced was remarkable. Hayam has written on it. So I'll look at these, therefore, to say that this is my preliminary observation. South was creative. And if you are talking of Indic cultural arc, or which I call as fractal circularity with no origin, but circulation with major and minor nodes in different temporalities and space, we can extend that not up to Philippines, but up to Japan. As I told you in my initial remarks, one of the Shingon 8 great patriarchs, if you go to any sites, Nara sites of Japan, where you have strong presence of Shingon Buddhism, you will find on the walls 8 great Buddhist patriarchs of Shingon Buddhism. One of them is from Odisha. His name was Subakara Simha. And he went through Java not through Java, but the overland route to China. And there he, translated many texts, such as Mahavairochana Tantra, Sarvatathagat Tattva Sangra, which took it to Japan and founded the Shingon Buddhism. Therefore, when we are talking of this, we are talking of other features which bound together. One is, for example, Sanskrit also played a critical role. If you look at Kakuin literature with metrical chandas, the inscriptions of Cambodia period or from Funan, all of them are metrical chandas, but from 13th, 14th century, as we moved on, we see Kakuin literature based or inspired by Sanskrit literature being replaced by Kidung literature such as Chandaloe and others. So therefore, we need to recognize also this functional autonomy of South. With these in background, let me look at textile trade boom in Indian Ocean water from 10th to 13th century, with reference to role of Kalinga. There are several crests and troughs in the Indian Ocean trade throughout historical period. The first crest that we find is found in early historical period. I am leaving the possible prehistoric connections where soldered ice seems to have come from Vietnam to eastern India, including Odisha. That's suggested by many historians, but I am ignoring the prehistoric connections, which possibly played a great role because Malays, were great also sailors. Starting with early historical period, there is a surge in contact and exchange in Bay of Bengal network, which is evident in related ware we find from eastern coast of Odisha. Also, we find, Ian Glover has a brilliant article on knobware in Haitian bronze that he has been found in many places in Southeast Asia. We have connections between Bali, between Vietnam, between Thailand, such as Bon Dontafet, Sembiron, Pakung in Bali. All these sites have revealed related ware, knobware, and these monochrome glass beads, which are also found from Odisha. Therefore, but there is also temporal lull in this kind of relationship. Early historical period from, let's say, 2nd century, 1st century AD to 3rd century AD was one crest period followed by trough. And there is again in 7th century, especially in the Tang period. And then there is a third boom that is in 10th to 13th century. And this boom was caused by boom in the textile trade. We have many ikat tradition or weft and warp tradition, which call as Bandha or Sambalpuri or Bandha textile traditions, where it's a tying traditions, and we see that. And as I told you, there is a textile boom in Indian Ocean water in 10th, 13th century. By that time, Arab Bhav has taken over the Indian Ocean trade. Arabic traders has emerged as the most dominant one in Indian Ocean, but there are also minor players, including the Malays, who played a critical role. Not until 13th century, in the late Song period, that we see the Chinese junk coming out of Southeast Asia, South China Sea to the waters of Indian Ocean, and therefore we see increasing presence of China only after 13th century in Indian Ocean, not before that, but 10 to 12th century, it was Malaya largely, and as I told, the Arab Dhaw. As you might be knowing, the Belitung shipwreck, which is now displayed in Asian Civilization Museum of Singapore, is a Arabic Dhaw which actually sank in the Javanese water. Therefore, in 10th century, there is a boom, and this boom was a textile boom. Indian textile is known throughout the world. And what also did this boom, what are the cause of this boom, was because of the fact that also from 11th century, when 10th century, when after the Merapi eruptions, central Javanese kingdom collapsed, and there is a shift to rice cultivation area of Brantas Delta in eastern Java. Therefore, what we see, starting from 10th, 11th century, with Airolanga uniting Java again and creating a state in eastern Java, we see a numerous expansion of agriculture in Java, especially in eastern Java, led to the emergence of localized states and consolidation of state system further in 10th, 11th century in eastern Java. Java's cloth industry evolved in response to new commercial opportunities. From 10th, 11th century on Javanese society, the Javanese society ceased to wear locally produced bark cloth, which was displaced by cotton textile. Therefore, we see a shift in pattern of clothing. Therefore, people earlier were using the bark clothes, now they are using cottons, and these cotton textiles became a fashion statement and also an instrument of reinforcing the social political ties. If you look at these Sima charters, I've looked at also John Wiseman Christie has looked at these Sima charters which talked about donations. Earlier, if you look at Sima charters, after the granting of this copper plate, there was a ceremony where people used to come together, feasted. That's you find in before 10th century in Sima Charter. But after 10th century AD onwards, what we find in the Sima Charter of Eastern Java is that there are detailed references to gifting of cloths, cotton cloths by royalty, by the king, to other political elite or other social elite. Therefore, cloth, or as I told you, there is a shift from bark cloth to cotton clothes in 10th, 11th century, accompanied by this use of cloth as part of reinforcing, consolidating the state system of Eastern Java from Aurolunga's time in 11th century AD. Therefore, in these Sima charters, cloth, earlier we have communal feasting as part of Sima grant. Now we have Sima grant accompanied by gifting of clothes by the royalty to political and social elites like Brahmins. And these were very elaborately discussed in these. And what we find in them is that there was always a difference which was made between the clothes worn by women and clothes worn by men. Kain in old Javanese, which was the cloth worn by women, was always measured in lula, that is piece, while Vidyan, cloth worn by men, was measured in U, that is ugala, dugala. Ugala means 2 pieces. So men always use 2 pieces and women always use 1 piece. That's one thing that we find from Sima charters. Now, if you catalog the kind of reference to different type of cotton clothes that we find in East Javanese Sima charters, I told you there are many Sima charters. I'll look at 9 Sima charters which talk about tax-paying foreigners, which clearly refer to that Kling is not a generic name for the South Asian. It refers to spatial geography of Odisha. And I'll say why, and that I'll do soon now. If you look at these Sima charters, and cloth has an important element that emerged, that is cotton weft and warp tradition, that which you call as our Sambalpuri traditions, or whatever. If I am a Kotiki, then I'll say Bandha Amara jo achi Nuapatana wala. Then that's all about geography and nation state made to all of us. So we have 60 at least variety of cotton cloths that we find. Takurang, a general term for a piece of cloth. Siwadinang, Hamarau, Puti, Gonjor Haji, Angesit, Raga, all of the Raga means red. You could very well know the kind of Sanskrit influence. I told you that Sanskrit continued to influence till 13th, 14th century, till the period of Majapahita. In 13th century, Majapahita was established in 1293. At least up to 13th century, we have Sanskritic chanda, meter system influencing Javanese literature compositions. Therefore, as many as 60 kind of cotton, warp and weft traditions, we find them in Javanese literature, these literature. Therefore, Songtset, this was, our Bandha tradition in old Javanese is called Songet. And we find in these inscriptions, Sapsima inscriptions, various kind of workers associated also. Textile artisans were distinguished in these Sima records for their skills as bleacher, dyer, were cloth merchants who supplied threads or pre-patterned clothes. Javanese consumerism, therefore, in 10th to 13th century included Kraton members, as I told you, who used cloth as an instrument of legitimacy, creating their own sphere of influence. Detailed list of gifts presented and careful notation of these recipients dominate the initial 9th, 10th century Sima charter that registered tax remissions. Sima charters including proclamation of lineage, equally that of local as well as royal families who agreed to the terms of these Sima charters. Then, therefore, I move on to tax farming groups, the Varga Kilalan, which are referred to 9 of these Sima charters from, let's say, 840 to 1305. These Varga Kilalan or tax farmer groups who came from different parts of the world to trade in East Java, and they have been referred to in these inscriptions. They are certainly different from the generic term such as used earlier in Javanese inscriptions, such as Juru Kling, Juru Sina, referring to generic Kling title, generic Sina, that is China title, which were earlier there. But now we have specific geographies, peoples of specific geography coming to the East Javanese water and trading. The first inscription is the Kalurungun inscription, written in 883, or Kaladi inscription it is also called. Let me go through all these inscriptions, few inscriptions, so that the geographical expansion of this Indian Ocean trade is visible to you. Earlier there is no reference to Chola, but later on Chola comes in. There are no reference to China. It came in. Malaya was not found earlier. Later on it was found. I'll go on like this. And what you see, there is absolutely no reference to Bani Gramam in this literature. Only Bani Grama began to emerge. Bani Grama or Mani Grama was a famous merchant Tamil guild whose inscriptions are to be found not only in Sri Lanka, in Southeast Asia, but also in Chinese, in 13th century, in Yunnan and other areas. But we don't find any Bani Grama merchant guild. What we get is the Western traders, Ayabhole's Nema or Aryabhole, which were there in Karnataka and western coast of India. If you look at these, this is from Kalirungan inscription, 883. The list of foreign members of Varga Kilan or tax farmer group of that time included Champa. Champa is central land, South Vietnam. Remanna Desha, that is Burma. Kimira, that is Cambodia. While the listed South Asian came from Kling, Kalinga. Pandikira, Karnataka. Aryapura, Aryapura, that is referring to the Ayabhole near Goa, Karnataka area on the west coast. And in the reading, Singhala is not very clear, but Singhala also, that is Sri Lanka. Therefore, what is to be clear is that Banigrama is not present. Kalinga is present. So also Karnataka, Cambodia, Burma, Raymond, Champa. Look at the kind of networks that was there in the Indian Ocean trade textile boom of 13th century. And I told you that Arab played a major role also in the navigation. Then the Palebuhan Charter of 927, which also refers to these tax farming foreigners near the river Solo in East Java. Then the Kane inscriptions of 1021 refer to Kling, Arya, Singhala, Pondigrika, Dravida. Now the term Dravida also comes in, not Chola till late, Champa, Remana, Kimira. Then we come to Turun Hang inscriptions and Garaman inscriptions. Then there is, before that, we have another inscription called 1021. As I told you, the Kane inscription still doesn't talk of, I have the detailed Kane inscription which I cannot go through, but look at the communities which have been referred to in the Sima inscription: potters, lime burners, indigo, dyers, oil pressers, dyers, ash processors, apus dyers, I don't know what is apus, sugar makers, makers of spindles, sun hats, knife sheaths, wood turners, mat, basket makers, trappers, clearly attesting the kind of also indigenous specialization, craft specialization taking place as part of this, cotton boom. You have the makers of spindles, dyers, all of these craft groups emerging as an important segment of society as part of this Indian Ocean boom. 5 minutes. I'll finish. Between 1040 to 1050, when Turung Hang and Garaman inscriptions were written, two changes had taken place in the names already contained in the list. Dravida was replaced now by Cholika, that is Chola, and Pondarika is now replaced by Karnataka. But as I am telling you, the name Kalinga is constant. Therefore, even the Chola, Dravida was replaced by Cholas, Ayavole and Pandarika was replaced by Karnataka. What is present is Kalinga throughout from 814 to 1305 and Sima inscriptions. Therefore, that was the kind of depth we had, which led to continuous interactions and participation in the Indian Ocean trade Kalinga had. Now, I am not going into many other aspects because I am looking at this only. By this time, most of the merchants arriving from the South Asian regions, including those from Kalinga and Sri Lanka, were probably operating from regions controlled possibly by Chola Empire. We don't know because Chola emerging as an important dynasty, challenging the Srivijaya Empire. You know this from various inscriptions. There is a slight hiatus in Singasari period, but also we find in 1292 when, as I told you, the paper I presented on Kirtanagar, we find just before his assassination another Sima chapter which talks about these traders. And then we have in 1305 Baloi inscriptions, which again talks about, this is the only original Majapahit inscription that refers to these tax-paying, foreign farmers who were trading in Javanese waters. And the Vargakilan list including Kling, Arya, Singhala, Karnataka, Sina, and you see for the first time Sina being included. That's in 1305, in the late period of Song, when Chinese junk came out of South China water and now started dominating also Indian Ocean. And therefore, in this Sima Charter, we also find references to the presence of Chinese as tax-paying foreigners in Java. Therefore, let me conclude my presentations. There was a boom and it was a boom by textile, propelled by textile. And India played a major part, but different geographies played and changed, different geographies changed over times as part of Indian participation in Indian Ocean trade boom, but Kalinga remained a constant feature. Just to conclude you, as I told you, Kirtanagara consecrated a Chamunda image in 1292, that's in Sanskrit, and in Chandi Jago, we have several Amogopasa image, most likely it was part of Jago Mandala complex, where we have small statuaries of Buddha and spouses of Buddha, consort of Buddha, such as Pandaravasini, Lochana. We have Syamatara, Sudhana Kumara, all of them written in 1292. I would certainly claim being a little biased. That's in Sanskrit. Long after Buddhist monasteries of Bihar or Palo were subject to Bhakti archaeologist desecrations, Sanskrit continued to circulate. And if you look at the paleography of that, because I have shown that to Subratacharya also, it's very close to Narasingha Deva, who built Konark temple. If you look at the inscriptions of Narasingha, the Konark builder, the constructor of Konark's, his inscription, and small Bharali, Lochana, Bharali, Pandaravasani, Bharala means Deva, God. Bharala, Akshava, these image inscriptions that we find in 1280, because Jago was built in 1280 by Kirtanagara as a monument to his father Vishnuvardhana. There we find inscription in chaste Devanagari, not only in Sanskrit language. Singasari consecrated Chamundai also is in Sanskrit, but in Javanese alphabet. Script is Javanese, language is Sanskrit. But here is in 1280, we have consecrated Amogopasa Lokeshwara and various Buddhas and their consorts, which are written on the image, Bharala, Varali, Akshava, Pandara, Vagara, in chaste Devanagari of 1280, which is very close to Narasingha's inscriptions that we find in Odisha, clearly attesting continuous connections of Odisha with this part of Indian Ocean, as I told you, bound together by Sanskrit, Hindu-Buddhist civilizations, but as again I told you, we need to recognize the creative South. Yankar is fantastic. We don't find a counterpart of Angkor Wat in India. We don't find a counterpart of Borobudur or Seu. They are fantastic. And therefore, with these words of functional autonomy of South, that is Southeast Asia and Japan, let us further explore the fractal circulation of Indic cultural arc in the historical period. Thank you so much.